Welcome back to another edition of Flipping Dust. So this edition is going to be a tutorial on how to fix drywall when you have had recessed lights installed. Many times electricians will go through a property and they will drill circular holes in the ceilings and in the walls so that they can thread the electrical conduit wire up to the cans. And what happens is, it depends on how the place is constructed. This particular property has a lot of wood beams that are going through the ceilings. I should tell you, this is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, and we're on the first floor. So there's no attic space, there's no crawl space above. So they had to do the retrofit cans and just kind of slip up into the ceiling. So there's very little space. When the electricians were doing their work, they did run into quite a few problems with all these cross beams. So we ended up having 40 holes in the ceiling. I'm just going to give you a quick shot of what those holes look like. We're just going to stick to the bedroom right here for the time being. So as you can see, we have all of these holes in the ceiling, and then also they had to make a hole right here so that they could thread the wires from the light switch up to the cans. So when my electricians come through a property and they drill these holes, I have them leave the discs of drywall behind. So I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. You can tell from the texture that this disc came from a ceiling hole, and this disc came from a wall. So this disc, if you look, it'll fit just like that. And then, of course, the ceiling disc will fit right into place. A lot of times when people are fixing drywall, what they do is they take an old scrap piece of wood and they will put it in the hole like this, and they'll drill a drywall screw through the drywall into the wood, and that creates a backer so that you can put your patch piece of drywall on top of it. I find that that gets to be a little bit messy. Sometimes that wood splits. I found a product that I love to use. It's these metal clips. So the way the clips work, you put it in here like so. These clips hold it in place. You drill the drywall screw right through the wall, it catches into these holes, and it grabs it in place. Then you have this plate that is behind the new patch. So you take this piece here, pop it into place, screw it all together, and then break these clips off. Then you just take your drywall compound and mud over it. Now, there's going to be an excess space right around here. And what I found in the past is if I just go and use this method, the space around the patch, it sucks up all of that drywall compound and it creates a dip. So after you have used your knife, spread that drywall compound over the patch, it has a little divot inside. And so you have to go through a second time, or sometimes even a third time, to fill in that drywall compound. What we're going to do today is put clips into all of these holes that we have to do. Again, it's 40 of them. After we put those clips in place, we're going to put drywall compound in the circumference of these patches. Then we're going to put the disc in place. Then we're going to put the compound over that patch. So you're going to see how this works. So I've gone through the property. I've put the clips in place. So what I'm going to do here is take my drywall screw and I'm going to screw it right through here, and I'm going to catch those holes so that we hold this clip in place. Now this is really strong, and that's gonna stay there. I'm gonna use this stud in the wall to help anchor my patch. Next, we're gonna take some drywall compound and we're gonna run it around this edge. That way, when we put the patch disc in place, the gap around here is going to be filled in, not entirely, but it's gonna help get that drywall compound in here. So when we take our knife and we spread that compound over the surface of the patch, it really gets in there and we don't have so much of a divot to go over as we do our touch-up. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to get enough drywall compound in here so that we don't have huge divots when the compound dries. I'm gonna take my disc and just push it into place here. So as you can see, we just put one screw there, another screw that went into the stud, and it holds that patch in place very nicely. I'm just taking my knife, getting kind of messy here. Just really pushing that compound in place. Now some people use a 5-minute dry time compound. I'm just using a regular off-the-rack pre-mixed compound. I have so many of these patches to take care of. I don't want to worry about running out of time. I also know I'm going to have to come back to these patches and do a second coat just because it will suck in the drywall compound as it dries. So knowing this ahead of time, I'm not going to stress about it too much. I just need to get through this project as fast as possible, but also I have to be as accurate as possible. So as you can see, it's really a very simple process. We did our one pass over the patch with our taping knife. We're gonna let this dry. I'm gonna go throughout the property and take care of the remaining 39 holes. When these dry, I'm gonna do a second pass with the drywall compound. We're gonna sand it down, and then I'm gonna show you how I texture it. So now the patch is dried, all the compound has dried. And I wanna show you, we were talking about how when the compound dries, the compound's gonna get sucked into the little crevices around the patch. So hopefully you can see this. Right here, you'll see where there's still an outline where that disc was inserted. What I'm gonna do is sand down that patch. What you see me holding in my hand right here is a sanding sponge. I love these. They're so comfortable, they're kind of squishy, so they just kind of mold into all the different crevices. Unlike, if you hold a piece of sandpaper in your hand, you can make gouges very easily. These are so user-friendly. One problem with these is if you go to a place like Lowe's or Home Depot, they can cost about $3 a piece, and that gets really expensive, especially if you're doing a large project. So I have found a few places online where they're less than $1 each. So I recommend shopping around. They can really add up over time. So let's start sanding this down and see how it looks. beautifully flat, totally smooth, and I'm gonna give it a few more passes. We are gonna texture it, so I just wanna make sure that it's totally flush with the wall, or else when you look at it from the side, you'll see a little bit of a bump. So I'm gonna sand it a teeny bit more, and then we'll be ready to texture. All right, so there you have it. We're gonna texture this, and it's gonna look good as new. Okay, so now we're gonna add the texture. Now there are lots of different methods to get the right texture. Some people will get a can that has texture in it. It's usually an oil-based product. I find that when it dries, it gets these little holes in it, so it's kind of hard to match the texture that's on a wall. There are other techniques. Actually, one painter friend of mine showed me how he wets a rag, and he'll dip the rag into some drywall compound and then just kind of pucker it back and forth on the wall, and then he'll sand it down when it dries. I like to really match the texture of a wall. These walls have a very, very slight orange peel texture. So what I use are sponges. You can get these sponges from an art store. I'm gonna give you a little view of these sponges. Here you can see we have an assortment. And this sponge is probably gonna give me the best texture that's going to match the wall. So over here, I've pre-mixed this drywall compound. You can see it's kind of like a wet, putty consistency. And all we need to do is dip the sponge into that compound, then take the sponge over to the wall, and we're just gonna stipple it back and forth. Little stipples. Then I'm going to blend it into the surrounding wall area. So you get this very fine texture on the wall. Now we're going to let this dry. I'm going to hit it very, very lightly with some sanding when it's totally dry. Then we're going to put our primer paint over it, and then our final wall paint. It's going to have a color to it. And everything here should blend in very nicely. So now our texture that we had stippled onto the wall is dry. I'm going to take my sanding sponge, and I'm just going to do a quick light sand over it. I'm just trying to knock down the peaks, because there are some sharp peaks that have just pulled off from the wall when I was pulling the sponge back, and that's totally normal. That's going to be expected. So I don't know if you could see it. We have these teeny little stipples all over the place. I'm going to just do a quick, very light sand. I should tell you, I'm using a 60 grit sanding sponge just because it's what was convenient. It's in my hand. I've been going through the property, sanding down all the other patches I did. So I'm just going to do a quick, very simple little sanding right here. I'm going to bring the camera in so you can see it. See how we just kind of softened those little sharp peaks that were poking out from the wall. Now I'm going to grab my roller brush. I'm using a 4-inch roller brush just because we have a small area here. And I'm using Kiehl's primer right now. So it's kind of like a thick primer, and it's going to fill in some of the little valleys between the texture. Then when we go over it with the final paint, it's going to fill in those valleys even further, and all of this texture is going to blend in with the rest of the orange peel that we've done. So let me go grab that roller brush. It's actually right here, very simple. Just going to do a nice even coat. Now I'm using a 1/2 inch nap on the roller brush. I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch nap throughout the entire property, so that way all of the brush strokes, if I'm using a roller, they're all going to blend in together. One thing that you want to be careful of is not to mix different nap sizes. So you could get 3/8 inch, 5/8 inch, 1/2 inch. You just want to make sure that you're using the same length of nap on the roller brush throughout the whole place. That way everything it really does blend much nicer. So now if you take a closer look, you could see how that paint has filled in some of those little valleys. And then when we do the final paint, you're gonna see, obviously, the end product, and it's gonna look beautiful. Now the final coat of paint is dry, and you can see the finished patch. You'll notice that the texture just blends into the wall, and it looks like there was never a hole there. If you have any questions about this video, please leave a message in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And if you'd like to see more tutorials, click the subscribe, like, and notification symbols. Thank you so much for watching Flipping Dust. Happy home improvements, and see you soon.